Good afternoon, Advocate Makhubele.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice and all commissioners.
Are you well?
Yes, I am.
You look like a person who's a bit uncomfortable.
Well, I am comfortable, Chief Justice.
You are?
I am. I was just rushed in. I was expecting the last candidate to
take longer.
Yes, so then she came back within what looks like a split second. So I was a bit ruffled by that.
Okay.
But otherwise, I'm comfortable.
Yes. For how many years have you practiced law?
Starting as a prosecutor.
How many as a prosecutor, how many at the next level?
I started as a prosecutor in 1992. Then I then went to the Master of the High Court. 1996, I joined the Pretoria Bar, 1999 to date. So that should make it 20.
All right. We'll work it out.
25.
And for how many years have you been a senior advocate?
I was recommended during 2012. The latest patent were actually issued in 2014 because the delay was caused by that challenged by Manching on the powers of the president to confer senior status.
Yes.
So we only had our latest patent issued. After that, the Concord confirmed that the president does have powers to confer senior status.
Yes. And for how long have you acted as a judge? Taking everything together?
I've counted the information I gave the judge president, and I think that he is going to confirm, is 58 weeks from 2013 to 2017.
Yes. And was it a challenge to produce judgments, or was it not much of a challenge?
Chief Justice, it wasn't much of a challenge because of the experience that I've had. From the time I started to practice, I have been in a position where I've chaired this or other tribunal committee where I wrote decisions or judgments, if one wants to call them that. So writing judgments was not a challenge. It's not a challenge to me. And with regard to the time for producing judgments, I have looked at the track record. I think I am within a period that can be considered a reasonable time. When I started, I would actually, when I adjourn the matter, I would actually adjourn it to a specific date, or thereafter I would issue notice to the parties that I will hand down judgments on the following date. So I would work within some time frames that I would have set for myself.
And has it ever taken you embarrassingly long to deliver a reserved judgment?
No, Chief Justice, it hasn't.
Yes. What was the longest?
I can't recall one that goes beyond 3 months.
Yes. Thank you. JP?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Advocate Makhubele.
Good afternoon, Judge President.
Oh, today you call me Judge President. I'll tell the Commission what you call me in other days. Okay? That by the wayside. I just want to thank you for the amount of time you've given the division in terms of acting stints. I know that I had to twist your arm very hard to come and act.
Yes, you actually did not give me an option the first time you called me, which was a pleasant surprise.
Now, you've done your fair share of acting. I think I've put you in the agent court 3 times, but that's towards the end of this latter part of your acting stints. And I think I've explained to the Commission why I do that. And you've done a massive 13 weeks in appeals. Have you sat in full court appeals?
I have 1 civil and 1 criminal. And I've actually written judgments for the full court.
You were requested by the judges to write the judgment?
Yes.
Right. Now, you have 18 weeks in the unopposed motion court. Isn't that a difficult court?
When I started, I thought it was an easy court, maybe because of the perception when we are there in practice, we think unopposed court is for juniors. But when you are there, you actually realize that that's the most difficult court, particularly because there's just one party and then all sorts of substantive law and procedures. And if you have not been in practice, I mean, doing that kind of work, you will not cope. But I then settled in.
Right. And the other capacities you hold are in adjudicatory mode, like you're the chairperson of the Water Tribunal, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
As we speak. And you've sat in other similar situations where you've had to adjudicate on disputes. Am I correct?
That's correct, JP.
Right. And you view yourself as ready?
I am ready.
Yeah. In terms of applying to become a judge, we've had this discussion for the last 3 years. Am I correct?
Yes, JP. Okay. That's why I said when you first called me, and over the time you encouraged me to apply, but I kept on saying I need to act and gain the experience. And in the latter part, I then said, I want to have maybe a full term, or rather more time for me to see if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I have made that decision.
Thank you. JP Hlophe is asking commissioner candidates about the racism issue. If you want, you can do that. Now, I just want to refer to one particular incident that happened to you.
Yes.
Which you came to report to me.
Yes.
In the division. And you can summarize it. I don't want you to name anyone.
Yes, Judge, Press JP. I was in, I can't recall whether it was an agent, or I think it was an agent court. This particular judge, the way he spoke to me, I cried in court. He dismissed me. I wanted to explain something. I think it was why the matter, why we didn't start at a particular time, and then he sort of, in a dismissive manner, as if he was talking to some primary school kid, said, just get on with what you are here for. And
I think that's the gist of what I wanted you to tell the commission. I know that I criticized you for crying in court, right? and you assured me that you were taken aback by that because you'd acted before in the division, and this is a person who'd regarded you as a colleague when you were acting. But then when you came in the court, then he treated you that way.
That's what hurt me most,
Yes.
because he's a person who knew me as a colleague.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in court, I'm not saying that should inform how anybody treats.
And
but,
he's white, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
he is.
and male.
Yes.
Right. I just want you to also share with the Commission some other instance that happened when you, if I'm not mistaken, you and your deputy brought complaints to me as JP and the DJP about what had happened at roll call in the hands of one white judge who was calling roll call at the time. I don't know if you recall that.
I can't immediately, JP. But I know there
Can I
were
refresh your
there
mind?
were complaints
Yes.
by practitioners about the attitude of the person that was calling, and as we then took it upon ourselves as leaders to approach you to discuss the matter.
Right.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that this is a judge who wanted to ignore senior black silks and preferred to call junior whites, to call their matters before. Even when the junior said to him, but I'm junior, he said, I've called you, call your matter.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember the incidents,
Yeah.
JP.
Yeah. I just thought, let me just prompt you. I know you didn't come to talk about this, but racism is featuring in these interviews. And you've had your fair share of this as a leader of the Pretoria Bar and in that instance in the court.
Yes, JP, if I may just add, also, as a junior counsel, there's a time when, not just me, but sometimes juniors will be forced to bring in senior white colleagues. Because if you appear as a junior, it doesn't matter how just the treatment that you get. But then most juniors will prefer to bring white senior colleagues because when he or she stands up, the judge listens. But if you go there being a black junior, you could see the attitude.
Chief Justice, I know I digressed. I had to show the Commission what this candidate had done in acting, but I just had to deal with these aspects because she brought them to my attention. Otherwise, I would not have known of them. But anyway, thank you, CJ. I've got no other questions.
Thank you, Judge President. MEC.
Thanks, CJ. Good afternoon, Advocate Makhubele.
Good afternoon, MEC, Commissioner.
You have declared in your questionnaire, and I quote, I resigned from the Masters panel during 2011 to concentrate on my legal practice. However, I'm obliged to finalize old matters that are taking time to finalize. The administration is done by the relevant co-liquidators. Do you mind to expatiate on this?
If I may understand the question, it's a fact, I have resigned. When I joined the bar, I also enlisted my name in the panel. The master has a panel of liquidators and trustees. So I would now and again get appointments because then I was still trying to see whether I should, I would go that route of the insolvency practice or practicing as an advocate. So then I made a decision just before I took up silk. That was 2011, that as a senior counsel and now having chosen to concentrate in my legal practice, this kind of would not sit well. So I then resigned. But then there are matters that I was appointed 2006 up to 2011 that are taking long to finalize. And the reason, I've written a judgment on surrender of estates. There is part of the reasons why it would take maybe 20 years for one matter to be finalized I can explain later on if I have to deal with that judgment. So I'm no longer involved there, and the master stopped giving me work during 2011, and I have not done anything about it since then.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Mamburu?
Commissioner Malim. What is the problem? No, thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
No, I'm fine. On a lighter note, Chief Justice, by the look of things, it's like you are a church goer, eh? You look more like me.
I think the spirit is we're connecting.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. It is said that the candidate will be the first black female silk to be appointed. What will be your words of encouragement, I mean, if appointed, to other female silks, in particular, black female silks? That is the first question. Number two, what is your greatest strength or your greatest weakness? How do these help or hinder your work, and what are you doing about them? Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner.
On words of encouragement to other silk, black females, I remember when I was addressing a symposium at the invitation of the Minister of Justice, because the minister is also worried about this issue of lack of females who apply for silk or even who come to the bench. But then my view, and having observed the trend or being there, it's senior, once a woman attains the status of silk, there is pressure that you must go to the bench. And my view is that that's a career decision that one must take. And unfortunately, our profession was sort of creating some barrier for women, that for you to act, you must be a silk. That's until recently. So a person will have to wait until you attain silk status, and then by then maybe you don't even want to go to the bench. But there are women who want to come to the bench, but who were not able or not even encouraged. I'm talking about the advocates profession, because of the perception that you must first attain silk status, which in itself was in my view unfair. So I think women must be encouraged, because by the time you are 10 years into your practice, you are qualified, in my view, to start to act if the JP invites you. And but often you hear people ridiculing some of us who choose to act, and they call it act of insolvency, and because of the stipend that we get from the judiciary when we act, as compared to what they will make when they remain practicing. So I think
Just to interrupt you, it's also said to be an act of insolvency to leave that lucrative practice and become a judge. We are
Yeah.
we are floating in the land of insolvency as we see us.
that is so, Chief Justice. So I think women know what they want, and individual people know what keeps them where they are. But also, if the JP invite people, they must take the opportunity, because until you act, you won't know whether you can be a judge or not. So it's only when you act. And as I've already explained, I told the JP that let me first see if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And on this, your second question was my strength. I think it's in, I have demonstrated. The part about being a social worker, a trained one, those skills, analytical, reasoning, and also writing. And I believe that with those kind of skills, I can make a contribution, because I often hear juniors who sit in my court that when I'm presiding, they also learn, because with time permitting, you don't just, even if in the unopposed court, you do explain, and in that way, people are learning.
Your greatest witness?
I haven't identified any, and no one has, but maybe my humble disposition. And some people would take advantage, but I have proven that that is my nature, and when circumstances permit, I do assert myself. And some will be shocked when they see me, they think I'm this quiet, maybe meek, but until I open my mouth.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner Mampuru. Judge President Hlophe.
Thank you, Chief Justice. My learned brother, Judge President Mlambo, has already asked the question I was going to ask you relating to racism, and I thank you for your answers in that regard. I have one more question for you. It is this. It's based on case flow management. We are given the limited resources that the country has. We're expected to do more and more with less and less. The question is this: were you to be recommended for appointment today, do you have any views that you would like to share with us as to how we can address the challenge of less and less resources, but more and more work? In other words, how can we now, as judges, work in a very smart manner, because litigation as well has changed in its nature? Any views in that regard?
Thank you, JP. I know that as acting judges, we are denied. I'm saying this in a respectful manner. We are denied access to modern resources that would make our job easy. I'm talking about access to internet and all those other facilities. But I know, or I seem to believe that judges have access to that. The other resource would be the researchers. I know at the Pretoria High Court, I'm speaking under correction. I think there are only 2 researchers or so. And you can imagine if they have to do research for so many judges, the quality of research that one would expect them to do. So if it's often, you look at the judgments that were written by 100 years or 50 years ago, but then you have to think, this judge was doing, there were fewer cases, and he or she had a researcher, 1 or 2, and they had ample time to deal with it. So I think that's one other resource that should be increased. That's a human resource. And I can't think of any other thing, JP, except the financial. I don't know if I have to talk about that, but it's an incentive, because when you are comfortable and stable, although you can never have enough financial resources, but it eases the worry, the burden. You can concentrate on the work that you're supposed to do.
Thank you, Judge President. Commissioner Msomi.
Thanks, CJ. I'm covered by Commissioner Mampuru. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Msomi. Commissioner Nyambi.
Well covered, CJ.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
You inspired me because just ahead of my tenure, you were the first black female at the Pretoria Bar. And when I read your annual report closely, one of the things that really stuck out, which may not come across adequately in this interview, was your strength of character. And I say may not because today you've actually demonstrated a soft side to your personality, which is quite obviously hurtful in many ways. And I'm sorry, that you've experienced that kind of hurt. But when you wrote your annual report, you spoke about the tremendous support you got from most people at the bar, but obviously there are always those who you wrote will unashamedly show their leader a middle finger. And you say you chose to ignore them. And I admired that strength in you. And if you were to take a position as a judge, I presume that strength of character is what people will see. They won't see the tears in court. They will see you stand up tall and be proud of who you are.
Definitely, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
It's me, Commissioner Kane. Thank you. Commissioner Norman?
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I just want to state and inform the Commission that it was very pleasant appearing before you. I'm just disappointed that you didn't attach that judgment that dealt with complicated mining and water matters. And I thought it would be great to have it as part of what you have supplied to the Commission. But I just want to record that you might view your humble disposition as a weakness, but it is actually your biggest strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Actually, I was thinking because the judgments or decisions of the Water Tribunal were publicizable, and the last one I think was in 2011, and getting the administrative part of the department to publish them again, it's a mountain to climb, but we are working on it. And it was also brought to our attention by a judge in the Western Cape recently, where there was an issue involving water law. And in that judgment, the judge said she wanted to refer the matter to the water tribunal. She knows it's functioning, but she's not certain because the decisions, she cannot see the decisions any longer, but we do give judgments. I've written many judgments for the water tribunal, and so as my colleagues, I've also written many judgments, as I've said, for in the Department of Health, the Medicines Act, and it's unfortunate my bundle is already full, and if I were to bring everything, it would. But I thank you, Commissioner, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Commissioner Norman. Commissioner Muteka, is he here?
I want to rub
Yes.
shoulders.
It's your turn, sir. Commissioner Didiza.
Thank you very much, President. Afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
One thing I noted in your CV is that you started as a social worker.
Yes, that's correct.
And I wanted just to ask from you, it's just one question. In your view, how has that training as a social worker, influence your work as a legal practitioner, both as an SC, but also in instances where you have been an acting judge?
Thank you, Commissioner. As I've already explained, that training, you are taught to, well, maybe the first one would be, it goes to what ultimately one would regard as the temperament of what's required of the judge. And social work as a profession, to start with, one, it requires someone who has that empathy for people, who always wants to conscientize people about their rights, and not just that, but also working towards doing that. And also the skill of writing, of analyzing, it now comes handy. One may not get credit. Well, they don't credit us for non-law courses, but at the end, when you look at what you have become, you then realize that the foundation was laid there. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Didiza. Commissioner Magazi.
Thank you very much, CJ. Inhlikani Mike.
Inhlikani nangwina.
You started being gainfully employed at age 12. What are the lessons that you would teach us and teach others that having been employed at age 12, these are the things that shaped your social attributes and your humble beginnings, as you have indicated? That is the first question. The second question is, in 1995, there was the fourth conference of Beijing a platform of action, which spoke to a number of things, particularly in terms of transformation. And since then, as South Africa in 1997, we promulgated legislation towards gender mainstreaming. Are we living up to this ideal? Because I know that you're dealing with transformation, particularly in the judiciary. Would we say that the legislations that we have churned we're living up to them? What are the deficiencies in this regard? Thanks, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, my background having to the 12 years when apparently I was intelligent and I was made to skip certain grades. In 1 year, I would do 3 grades. And as a result, I finished primary school very early. And unfortunately for my parents, it became a headache because I caught up with my elder brother. There was no money to take any one of us to secondary school. And I stayed home. And the local principal just had a baby, and I went there to look after the baby and work in the house as a maid. You know, for a long time, I was angry about that situation. I could not understand, but
oh, okay.
I was angry. But in retrospect, I think it's part of the positive foundations that shaped who I am. Because if at that age you accept your circumstances, you do not try to, nowadays children run away and become something. I also see that as an environment that protected me from the harsh world out there, because unlike me, at least I was in somebody's house, I had food and everything, although I was a child worker. My brother had to go to work in the farms, and that year actually determined our respective fate. My brother passed on some 5 years ago. He never recovered from that year. But that's why I'm saying, why I say for me now in retrospect, when I reflect, I see it in a positive way, because things could have been worse. If that did not happen, I would also have ended somewhere, maybe due to some cultural practices. I would have been married at that age and not proceed with school. So it's something good came out of that for me now when I look back. The second part of your question on the gender, whether we are doing well or not, it's sort of disappointing when you have all the legislation, you have at government level, you also have, I'm talking about in the judiciary, not generally, you also have a ministry dedicated to women, and I believe it will also, one of the competencies would be gender equality. That these kind of discussions only appear to gain momentum at times like this. For me, it would do us good if there could be ongoing discussions, and not just discussions, because I know a lot of time is wasted in conferences, but positive steps that should be taken to ensure that women do get the opportunities to not when they think they are ready to become judges, but there should have been steps taken to assist them to become judges that are appointed on merit, not just to fill the numbers of, or rather the statistics. You know, so that should, that's for me, it's where we are lacking, because you would only hear voices talking about these issues when there are decisions like the ones you have to make at the end of this meeting. And I would expect women's groupings to know who are the women in the profession and how we are doing, and not to be concerned after the JSC has issued notices. I don't want to go on and on. Sorry for the long answer.
No, thanks. Commissioner Musaka?
I understood you to mean that your knowledge of social work enhanced your sense of justice. Would you not think that social sciences should be made compulsory courses for law students, so that all lawyers are grounded in those sciences?
I agree with you, Commissioner. It should be part of the training, because when you try to assume.
Harvard, don't.
Thank you.
I think your mic is off, Prof.
You think it is right that magistrates, courts, presided over by people who have not studied indigenous law of a particular community and don't know the language of the community concerned, should hear appeals from traditional courts of those communities?
Commissioner, I think for any indigenous cases, although it will be sort of prescriptive, but it does not sit well. Because when you read about it and when you live it, there's a difference. So I believe that it creates that vacuum. It's the same as having, for instance, let me use the word, someone who doesn't, I'm Tsonga speaking, someone who doesn't speak Tsonga, teach Tsonga. It's the same for me.
Lastly, CJ, would you agree that maybe indigenous African law and at least one indigenous African language should be compulsory courses for all law students?
I would even go earlier than being a law student, because by the time you go to university, you have acquired all the your vocabulary is it's almost. I would go to primary school level, because there are certain terms that, even though concepts rather, even legal concepts, even though I'm Tsonga speaking, if I were to be asked now to start even answering your questions in my language, that would be a problem. So I believe at foundation phase, and it used to be like that. I remember we were taught in Xitsonga at primary school. And what happened to that, I don't know. But and then only when you went to high school, then English was introduced. But it's necessary, even at foundation stage, because that's when vocabulary and even standardization of the language itself, because although I'm Tsonga, there could be somebody who is Tsonga from, for instance, the eastern parts of South Africa. We do not speak the same. There are certain concepts which are not the same.
Yeah, on a lighter note, and as we conclude, it's actually a pity because even at home, many parents don't speak the language with their children. It's all English with a particular accent. Is that not so? And we are the people who are supposed to develop the language to that extent as lawyers and judges. So who's going to develop it? No book, or maybe one by Koyana, in African customary law written by an African. Who's going to develop all these concepts? Who's going to give expression to these language rights that we are pushing for? Do you know of any?
Chief Justice, I wish the MEC was sitting here when I give this response, because I believe our children, they're even worse.
Because of us.
Because I'll give an example where I stay. My grandson, his father is speaks Shona, his mother Tsonga. At school, he is forced to learn in English and Afrikaans. In the community where he's playing with his mates, one is Venda, one is speaks Sotho, one. At the end of the day, this child must learn all these languages. When is he going to learn and master sciences? So I think there's something needs to be done.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Advocate Makhubele. You're excused.
Thank you, Chief Justice and Commissioners, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.